My big thing before I help anybody is ask, like, what is your goal for being in this field, right? Like, why is your why for doing this? If you can't articulate that towards me, then I can't help you reach your goals. Because everything other than that, like if your why is strong enough, then everything else is your strategy and step, which is easy enough for me to figure out. But your why has to be very strong, because if it's not, you will not get through all this. But in most real life environments, you're going to have a network team that will handle that. You won't actually configure those from scratch. They're not going to let you touch all that, right? Because for concept of leaf privilege, why would you allow one person to have access towards entire systems like that? That's not good security policy, right? You understand that everything that's worth value in life is going to be hard, right? Getting married, having kids, starting a family, taking care of yourself, those all require sacrifices. So it's just up to you to determine if the sacrifice is worth for what I actually want to get at the end. If it's not, then maybe do something else. But if it is, then go for it, right? Then just understand it may take longer than you expect, right? And that is okay.
Imagine being passionate about cybersecurity, but can't afford the $15,000 training programs that big corporations get. That's exactly the problem our guest, Kenneth Ellington, faced and solved. As a founder of Ellington Cyber Academy, Kenneth has turned his expertise into a mission to make cybersecurity education affordable. From helping professionals break into the field to training the next generation of threat hunters, Kenneth is here to share his story. Hey, Kenneth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, great. So tell me a little bit about, take us back to where you started. What first draw you to cybersecurity, and how did you discover your passion for threat hunting?
Well, I would probably say this is all kind of by accident. I never wanted to do cybersecurity initially. So my dad's actually been a software engineer for, almost 28 years now. So he's the one that kind of pushed me and my brother to get inside technology when I was in middle school. So I'm the youngest kid. He made me do a Code Academy course like online, like during the summer. I'm like, Dad, this is the lamest thing ever. I don't want to do this. So I'm like, no. So I went for business management for my undergrad when I went towards USF and HEC. It wasn't until I got towards actually USF, I went to community college for my first 2 years to get my associates, and I went to USF. So when I got there, I'm like, you know what? Let me actually specialize in something. I'm like, Dad, what should I do? He's like, how about IT camp? I'm like, I'm like, that's like a great idea for me to do. So I did IT, and then I found out about cybersecurity. I was like, oh, this actually sounds pretty cool. And so that's kind of how I started to get interested inside cybersecurity. From there, so back to where I'm from Tampa, Florida. I live in Dallas now, but I grew up in Tampa for most of my life. Now with the USF for my degree, right? So I work for Publix supermarkets. They're a big supermarket chain, like in the Southeast, right? They're awesome. I love it. So I worked there for, I want to say 4.5 years. When I was there, I worked in deli, frying chicken, making sandwiches, right? So one of my things I tell my students is let people know what your true desires are, so they're able to speak on your behalf when you're not inside the room, which is what I did often. So I told my store manager, Lori, at the time that I wanted to do something more technical, like cybersecurity, IT, right? I told her if there's any job with people that I should meet inside of Publix to just let me know. And so I want to say 2 weeks later, she's like, hey, Kenneth, she's like, you said you want to do a cybersecurity still. I was like, yeah. She's like, well, the director for cybersecurity for Publix is coming towards our store like in 2 weeks. She's like, you want to meet him? I'm like, yes, of course. So I sat down with him. His name was Rick. Our name still is Rick, right? He loved my energy, my passion, right? He's like, Kenneth, he's like, I want you on my team next year for my internship team. I was like, oh, great. He's like, if you can do all of these next 6 steps over the next 9 months, I can almost guarantee you a spot on my internship team for next summer 2019, because it was June of 2018 that time. The spot was already filled. It's a sure thing. So it was like studying for Security Plus, learning Splunk, going towards B-Sides in the Cyber Florida conference, then shadowing the SIEM in October. So I did all those steps. Fast forward, in February and March, I interviewed for his team, that slot. 2 weeks later, I get the job. And so that's how I got inside cybersecurity. So I was a threat intelligence analyst for them.
Awesome. So I think that's amazing that your manager at the store, she went out of her way to go figure out whether there was a position available, or found out that someone was visiting, I guess, right?
Yeah.
That's great that she got you to have a meeting with them. And you know what I think is amazing, Kenneth, is that you actually went through the work, right? And I say that because I've talked to a lot of young people. I tell them, hey, when they say, hey, how do I break into cybersecurity? And, I give them paths to do that. And sometimes they do it and sometimes they don't do it. But it takes a lot of perseverance and persistence to actually get through the material, right? And you said you started off with Security Plus?
Yes.
Right. And then you went into do some other stuff with like B-sides and some other things, right? So
B-sides is a local security conference.
Right.
One's all across the country, right? Or B-sides Tampa, which is one that I went to. I still go to one every single year. The B-sides Tampa was back in May, so I went towards that one as well. Then there's like the state Florida cybersecurity conference. That happens every October. I think they might have moved it, but it was October back then. So that one was held in Tampa as well. I went towards that one, and then I shadowed the team in like October as well.
Yeah. And so you got into the team as an intern doing threat intelligence analysis, right? And how'd you like it?
I loved it. That was the first time I ever realized or understood like what it meant to love your job. If people told me that, I'm like, that's such a BS. I'm like, you can't love your job because I made sandwiches and fried chicken, right? I did not love my job. But there, it was like I loved every day, right? I loved going to work, which felt really, really weird. It was just such an amazing feeling, right? Learning so much, like doing hands-on work. So I did threat intelligence analysis for Bits Jobs. It's like a back-end Windows admin system. I did a MITRE threat intelligence report for that, presented from my CISO and my CEO and CFO. I got to tour all the facilities, how all the meat, the milk, the dairy, the bakery stuff is all made. I got to understand the history of Publix as well. So I worked as like a normal analyst. They didn't put any kid gloves on me. So I had access to basically everything to do my job. My last week, I almost cried because I did not want to leave. I told my manager, Dan, he works at MITRE now. Not MITRE, Mandiant, or technically Google now. And I'm like, Dan, if you allow me to stay, I will clean the toilets every day before I leave. He started laughing. I'm like, I'm not joking. Like, I'm being dead serious. I'm like, if you tell me to clean the toilets every single night before I leave, I will do that to stay here. I loved working there. It was absolutely wonderful.
So did you get to stay on?
No. So I asked, they wanted to keep me on, but I guess because of budget constraints, they couldn't keep on like a full-time analyst for that time. Funny enough, I had like a contingent offer to join like in March. But COVID happened. I graduated during 2020 and everything just like changed, right? Because
everything started falling apart for everybody. So is that how you kind of rolled into teaching, or was it because 2020 was when COVID happened?
Yeah.
But you started teaching in 2021. How did you go from the internship? What happened between the internship with you as a threat intelligence analyst and you beginning to teach in 2021?
So I've been teaching since I've been, I want to say like maybe 20, 21 years old. I'm 28 now. So I taught elementary students cybersecurity. I started teaching them initially, and then from there I started teaching adults and professionals, especially during COVID because I'm stuck at home and everyone's dying. I'm like, I might as well be productive with my time. All right. I was stuck at home, couldn't do anything. So I got an offer for a software engineering job at DTCC like in January, but I didn't start until July. So I had 2 months of free time after I graduated with my degree. And again, I literally couldn't go anywhere. Everyone shut down. So I'm like, might as well be productive. So I started teaching and training people like that May. I started creating a course curriculum to learn Splunk and other security products and to start teaching people. I'm really bad at it. People loved it. All right. People said I'm really good at it. And I started doing that for 2 years. And I went to the University of Houston to teach as well. I got a job there. I taught professionals. I think the end of 2021, someone told me, they're like, Kenneth, if you actually charge me to teach and train you, I would actually pay you money for it. I was like, oh, really? I was like, okay. Then someone told me that again. Like 2 months later, I'm like, what? Let me actually run my own training class. And then I'm like, actually charge for it. I charged like, I want to say $85, which is like nothing. But I had like 10 people sign up for it. So I'm like almost $900 for it. And for me, that's not the crazy amount of money, but for me, that was like someone actually paid me for my own knowledge, right? Purely out of my own like ability. There was no big company, no corporation helping me out. It was just me, my skill set. So for me, that like unlocked like a key in my mind, right? I couldn't like unlock that, or couldn't like lock that door back again. So from there, I was kind of like, what, screw it. Let me actually start a company and see how far I can take this. So we've been in business for 3 years ever since.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think it's a very difficult thing to kind of hit that threshold where someone's telling you that your time is valuable, right? And and if you love it, like if you were just kind of doing it as something that you wanted to do, right? And the idea that someone's going to pay you for it is a weird feeling. That someone
It really was.
Yeah, and so my background is more IT than I started in IT and then moved into cyber. I remember I had my own company back. This is a long time ago. It's 2001 through 2010, where I had my own company in Austin. One of the hardest things for me to do was actually keep up with the time that I was doing working for people, and then and sending them a bill. It was difficult for me to do it because I enjoyed it so much. It was hard for me to, I felt like I should pay them. It was like, because it was fun. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed technology. But yeah, I think that's difficult. But yeah, I think that's awesome and very enterprising. When you're teaching folks, right? What's the most surprising thing that you learn from teaching cybersecurity?
Probably a couple of things. People can do much more than they actually realize, right? My biggest enjoyment is making people become the best versions of themselves, even if they don't believe in the moment, right? Which happens really often. But people are like, they can't, like, I'm a can't get her. I'm like, yes, you can. I've helped 40 other people like you. I'm like, I promise you, you can get her. Like, I wouldn't. I'm like, I wouldn't brought you on if I didn't think it could help you. And then just like 9 months later, they get the job, they get the opportunity, they'll take care of the family. Say, oh, Kenneth, like I did. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I told you you're going to do it. I'm like, why do you sound surprised?
Yeah.
But it's like, it's hard to see the forest when you're inside the trees, right? You can't see the bigger picture because you're actually in the mud. So it's really cool for me to be that guide for them and say, okay, you can actually do this. Here's what you need to do. Just follow these exact steps, right? And you'll be in a good spot. Another part is, it's funny from the other side, right? But for a lot of people before they join, right? They're so hesitant to join because there's a lot of scammers, as you know, like out in the field. They're just there to take your money, right? They're actually there to help you out. So it's like really funny to see they're so hesitant, like, man, like I'm like, I don't trust you yet. I'm like, all right, sure thing. I'm like, just give me a week and you'll see what I mean. I just like, oh, Kent, it's like so amazing. I'm like, yeah, like I know, again, like I'm telling you, right? So this is a really cool feeling.
That's great. So one of the things that we talked about in the opening was that, there's a pretty hefty, and I'll tell you honestly, as a CISO or any leader inside cybersecurity, one of the most, frustrating, I think, conversations for both executives and the folks that are working for you as analysts and such is actually training. It's a very frustrating conversation because there's some of it is, and I'm gonna tell you from my side, right? And I'll tell you why it's frustrating. And it just may be me. I may be the common thread here as a problem. I found that the training that's available out there, there's good training out there, but some of it really doesn't apply to your corporate work life, and then it's so expensive. And, we mentioned about the $15,000 training cost. And I feel like that's a hefty amount of money for training. People have a desire for training. They really want training, but the training that's available is expensive. And then it doesn't really apply to like corporate environments. Like the director of cybersecurity that you had, Dan, that was at Publix.
Yeah.
He told you, go learn Splunk. Right?
Yeah.
He said, do that. That is something that you will see in a lot of security operations centers. You will see Splunk all over the place. As opposed to what I see, other training doesn't utilize Splunk, right? It's you know what I mean? It's like, it's not part of the curriculum to actually, train people on the tools that you're actually going to see in industry, right? In an environment. We're not mom and pop shops and we're not using free tools to kind of do everything, right? And then now there's a lot of concepts that can, be transferred, but I find that, hey, the cost's super high. And then the direct applicability to the role that I have, I find it difficult for me as a buyer of training products to invest that way, right? It's like, I need to know that it's going to be applicable and it's going to be reinforced when when they get back to the job, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to be able to use it, right? And I think that, like, for example, in your experience, he asked you to learn Splunk, you learned Splunk. Therefore, when you got into the role, you're ready to go, right? Now you're just reinforcing that activity.
So for us specifically, I'm very big on making it very realistic and hands-on for what I do. The majority of our stuff is pretty hands-on. Up to 80% of whatever we train people on is either hands-on. From the standpoint of actually hands-on keyboard, actually, if it's building scripting rules, if you're building detection rule, build detection rule, build on environments, right? And the rest is 20% theory based and lecture based. That's the best way I've learned. That's the way I teach my students as well as my partners. So for a curriculum base, I have a lot of hiring managers that I partner with for various firms, right? And I ask them, hey, what are some things you look for inside of candidates, right? What's some new platforms you guys are trying to implement for your companies, right? And they tell me, and I just put it inside the program, right? So for example, we've added like Atomic Red Team because I know that's been, especially for detection engineers, threat hunters, that's been another big aspect that they've been asking for people to actually emulate threats and then detect against it. So we've been adding that inside of our training programs as well. Splunk is still probably the most popular platform we use for most of our programs because almost every single Fortune 100 firm still uses it. We've also added Sentinel because I use it for a lot of my clients. And then I know a lot of firms have Sentinel, right? Is Sentinel the best platform on the market? It is not, but everyone has Microsoft products, so we have to learn. That's the way I looked at it, right? So we cover like cloud security from AWS and Azure. We also cover SOAR as well, since larger firms like to use that, right? So we cover that as well from like an automation and response perspective. We'll also cover Jira for project management because every large corporation has Jira or like Raleigh or some Trello or something to use, right? And then as like an analyst or engineer, you want to be able to manage your process. So there's different things that get brought up into the industry. We try to bring it towards the actual front of light. Cause my biggest pet peeve is you can charge whatever you want for your product. I'm like as long as it does a good job, right? I won't go towards like a fancy restaurant and say, well, it's $300, right? If that's the price you want to charge, you can charge it. Just make sure your product is good. Is my only thing to ask, right? So that's why we make sure everything we do here is pretty high quality from the standpoint of I literally just ask the people that are looking for candidates, hey guys, like what do you want? And they put it inside of it. That's normally how we set things up.
I really appreciate your approach, asking people what kind of technologies are putting in place, and then being realistic about what technologies are being used, whether it's Splunk or Sentinel. And your opinion about it doesn't really matter because it is what's deployed there. It's what's there, right? And so being able to walk in on the first day as an analyst and understand Sentinel, I would think that that's a valuable skill to have. I don't know if Sentinel is that complicated, but it's all the stuff around Sentinel, and how you have to like kind of manage going back and forth between different screens and stuff like that to kind of build a story out. I think that could be easier. I like your approach, right? And how's it been working for you? Has it been working pretty well?
Yeah, we get really good results from our clients. Well, the ones that listen follow through. Everyone doesn't know into that, right? I tell people, right, if you want to look like Brian James, you can't eat chocolate cake every day. It's just throughout.
Right. And like I was telling you, you can bring all the material, you can line it all out, but unless people have the perseverance and persistence to do the work, the outcome is questionable, right?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people, right, like this is hard work. People tell me they don't need for the money, which is fine, right? It's all everyone bills to pay, right? I tell people this is purely for like a money grab. There's other ways you can make probably a lot more money than working in cybersecurity, honestly. Right? I have a lot of friends that make money doing very boring jobs, washing cars, owning businesses like that, and the very successful. So you don't have to be in cybersecurity, right? It's okay if this isn't for you. That's perfectly fine, right? My big thing before I help anybody is ask like, what is your goal for being in this field, right? Like why, right? Like why is your why for doing this, right? Because if your why is not strong enough, then you won't get through the how part of it. And so if you can't articulate that towards me, then I can't help you reach your goals, right? Because everything other than that, like if your why is strong enough, then everything else is your strategy and step, which is easy enough for me to figure out, right? But your why has to be very strong, because if it's not, you will not get through all this.
Agreed. I mean, I think a lot of folks think that they can just get into cybersecurity and that it's just going to like fall into place, and I think there's a lot of background information about technology that you have to know to kind of understand, like when you look at an event, what does it mean and what's going on in the system, and being able to place like that system in context with whatever it is you're investigating. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like there's a lot of other kind of ancillary like subjects around it? I mean, because it's not really about just the tool. It's about getting through an investigation.
Yeah, there's a lot of like overreaching other concepts you'll have to understand. For if you even work as a SOC analyst, a security engineer, detection engineer, right? So like log and monitoring, right? How does a log actually get from one end towards the other? How does the teams interact with each other, right? A lot of times I try to break it down for us realistically, right? Hey, for example, if we're creating a SOC environment out, right, you'll be in AWS or like Azure, you'll have to create some network rules, right? So I'll break it down for how they can create it. But I'm like real honest with them, like in most production environments, you won't actually create the network rules, right? There'll be an entire network team that'll handle that. So you won't ever actually get to touch that, or you shouldn't, right? But I tell them how to actually do it, right? So they understand conceptually, okay, here's how you actually do it. But in most real live environments, you're going to have a network team that will handle that, right? Then like server security as well. You have like a Windows and Linux team that will handle the Windows and Linux servers, right? You won't actually configure those from scratch. They're not going to let you touch all that, right? Because for concept of leaf privilege, why would you allow one person to have access towards entire systems like that? That's not good security policy, right? But I thought explain to them at a technical and conceptual level, this is how you would do it. But in most realistic scenarios, you won't have that much access towards it, right? So make sure they understand, like, how does it actually work inside a client environment, right? What roles and abilities would you actually have? Because for me, I've worked because I've been a consultant for like the past like 3 or 4 years now. I've worked for like 13 companies. So I've seen a lot of different environments, and I know what firms look for and how they actually run their shops.
I like it. So let's talk about a little bit about your customers, the training folks. What are they seeing like on the wire and stuff like that? Are they what's their experience like with respect to attacks and initial access and how attacks are progressing? Are they seeing any kind of trends that you're spending more time talking about than other things? For me, what I've been evangelizing a lot is just been browser security, right? Things that are happening in the browser. I mean, we were talking a little bit about Azure and GCP, and those are very, cloud infrastructure kind of technologies. But a lot of companies deploy SaaS products all over the place.
In the browser, yeah.
And then they're getting to those SaaS products in the browser. And I've been finding that there's been somewhat of a gap of understanding in how our users are interacting with systems. There's been definitely a lot of focus on EDR, which is good. Or I'm not saying you don't need EDR. And SWG, like, proxies and other kind of gateways to control flows of data. But when your cloud is all over the place and everyone's running SaaS products, it's really kind of hard to constrain, movement of data through the browser to other places. And I'm just kind of curious, are people thinking about the browser? Are you seeing people think about the browser? Are they worried about, losing control of information or losing control of identities through their interactions with SaaS apps and such? Or what are you seeing? Are you seeing something else entirely different?
I would say it's become more common in the past couple of years. I know a lot of larger firms have been trying to focus more on it. I know Palo also has an office in Plano, like in Dallas. So I go to events quite often. A lot of times they'll talk about, I forget what it's called, for their cloud security product that protects the browser.
Prism. Talon.
Yeah, Prism. So they've been going over demos about that for how does it actually work. It looks really cool, right? Because you're right, most firms have a lot of different SaaS products, and most of their team will access it through like a web browser, right? So different session attacks such as hijacking, right? DNS poisoning can happen on the browser, right? And then the phishing attacks can route people towards a malicious browser and then steal their data, right, in the back end, and then not even realize that. So being able to actually detect against that is another attack vector to try to be on the lookout for. Because most firms, because they've moved their infrastructure towards more of the cloud SaaS space, right, those sometimes overlooked at, and that can cause issues down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my own experience was, most recently as the CISO at Dyson, I was pretty convinced that I had the right technologies in place, to cover my programs. But I think that I was actually a little bit surprised. I knew some startup founders and such, and we did some audits of my system just to see like, hey, how things are going. And I pretty much found that only about 20%, 30% of my SaaS apps were actually that my users were using were actually part of my program, like meaning it had MFA and SSO and conditional access, and the other. It's like 200 some apps. And then I had like another 600 apps that were not part of the program, that people were just like signing in with Google and or signing in with,
that sounds about right. That sounds about
or
right.
using their credentials to kind of do things. And it was a eye opening to see how big of a attack vector the browsers were, with respect, and then how little visibility I actually had in what was going on in the environments, especially on other platforms like Linux and Macs. And then outside of Microsoft Edge, because everyone's uses a lot of people use Microsoft products. It was really kind of eye opening to me how big of an attack vector it actually was, and how easy it was to lose control in the SaaS environments.
Because for one of my last clients, I was a threat hunter for them. We had people that they were they were an Outlook shop, so they use Microsoft, right? And then I got told by my insider, a risk director that, hey, there's some certain attack vectors to be looking out for. Can you check it out for our users? Like, oh yeah, sure thing, for like insider risk, which is really big for financial companies and then other larger corporations. So people were like using Google Gmail Suite, and we don't have that at all, right? Yeah. So people were like moving stuff from like Outlook and SharePoint and just uploading it towards their personal or some other type of like G Suite product, right? And so I had to like look for the amount of users who are doing it, like how often does it happen, are there any spikes in it, like what time of the hours, are the contractors, right? And kind of build up that profile from there. So it's like a cool investigation that I was doing to try to be more proactive from it.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's exactly the kind of scenarios that I think like browser detection and response can get you into, where you have that visibility inside the browser, so that you're not. I mean, I just can imagine inside of a Microsoft shop that I was trying to figure out like what the network flows are and where things are going away from, and then looking at the host and trying to get EDR to kind of tell me what was going on. I imagine that was a little bit complicated because you couldn't see what was actually happening in the application, the browser application itself.
Yeah, I didn't. All I could see was people were moving stuff from Outlook to Google. It was hard to tell like what was being sent, right? I didn't have access towards that. So it was kind of just like, I don't know what they're sending, but they're sending something from Outlook towards Google. So we should probably stop this from happening, right? And because I was a contractor, right, I couldn't just shut down people's systems or tell them to stop. I had to go through the chain of command, right?
Of course. It wouldn't matter if you were just an analyst. I'd want you to go through the chain of command. Like you were saying, it's like least privilege, role-based access controls. It's if the server team owns the infrastructure or the endpoint technology team owns the infrastructure, let them go figure out how to go grab stuff and everything else, right? Very good. Well, I mean, you also worked with a lot of SIEM and SOAR technologies. How do these technologies work together in real world scenarios? I mean, you've been doing a lot of client work. How are the SIEM and the SOAR technologies working together? Are you seeing a lot of good traction there, or are you seeing partially implemented stuff, or what are you seeing?
So from like a SIEM perspective, right? A lot of firms will have multiple SIEMs for compliance reasons, right? So again, I'll go financial company because they are just the biggest ones, right? Someone might say, all right, guys, you have Splunk, but you need to have like a cloud SIEM. So they'll get like Sentinel or something like that. Then no one will actually configure it, right? So they spend a lot of money to use Sentinel, but it's not actually being used at all. So it's gathering dust. Or they'll have like a SOAR platform. And I'm thinking, you guys are kind of small team to have a SOAR platform. Why do you have a SOAR platform? Because someone did a demo for it and then the CISO liked it and then said they bought it, right? Which happens quite often. And so they're like, hey, can we set this up? I'm like, we can. You probably get most use out of it because you guys aren't that security mature yet, right? Like for Splunk, there's like their 4 levels of security matureness, right? Level 4 would be like a large, probably Fortune 100 firm. They'll have everything like a threat hunting team, a detection engineering team, incident response team, like all the bells and whistles, right? Because they're very mature. So they can be much more proactive than reactive. And you have like all the way down to like level 1 or level 0, which is like a mom and pop shop, right? Some firms will be like probably level 2. So they'll be a little bit security mature. They'll have some foundational pieces in place and they're trying to get like a SOAR or some type of other advanced tooling in place. I'm like, guys, you haven't done the fundamental things first yet, right? So let's take a step back.
Right. Yeah. I think that there's definitely a lot of shiny objects out there, and vendors are really good at kind of, getting to your, FUD, your fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and kind of playing to that. And having run security operations centers myself, and having been a CISO, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think there's so many other kind of fundamental things that need to get done first, right? Like just get time synced. Know what time is and how you're going to configure time. And then when you get your logs, you know what time it is on the log, and then breaking out the logs and getting it to where you need it to be. There's a lot of prioritization work that needs to happen at the beginning with what log sets you're bringing in. And again, making sure they're parsed correctly. And then, then you have your detection engineering work, which, if you, work with Sentinel or Splunk Enterprise Security, you can get a lot of good content from those systems as well, especially if you're integrating with their well-integrated products like CrowdStrike or Defender or SentinelOne or whatever. Those things, need to be ready for the analyst before don't just give alerts and then just throw an analyst at it. Because, how are they going to go and do an investigation and get a quality output there? I feel like we're saying the same thing. It's like, the SOAR is kind of like up at the, more at the top. You got to get the basics done first. And then once you get the basics done, then you actually know what it is that you need to automate.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like you're telling me that sometimes the SIEM SOAR stuff is working well at more mature organizations, but sometimes it's just a shiny object that's on the shelf that the team isn't ready to use. And you're seeing just different aspects of that too.
Yeah. I like to say, for analogy, imagine someone has 3 Ferraris and trying to buy like a Porsche 911. I'm like, you don't even drive these other cars. Why are you trying to buy this car?
Yeah, that does definitely remind me of when I was a kid and a friend of mine had a Corvette, and this is, and I was going to they needed to go get, like we need to go get something to eat or something like that. And this is a long time ago. And I remember trying to get across Westheimer in Houston and was waiting for like a spot for me to go in, go through. And I had no idea. It was the first time I had driven this Corvette, and I had no idea how much power it had. And I did like a full 360 in the middle of this street, and it scared the crap out of me. But it's just like you're saying. It's like it doesn't. You can have all the power in the world, but that doesn't mean you're ready. So I like your analogy. So, are you doing anything with like? Do you do any capture the flag events and threat hunting or?
I do threat hunting. I've done capture the flag since I've been in college, honestly.
Okay.
But yeah, we do threat hunting scenarios, right? A lot of it's either like AWS cloud-based. It's the most common one I see.
Yeah.
So we'll have them either ingest or create their own live or static logs through like CloudTrail, CloudWatch, ingest those inside of Splunk, whatever other platform they want to use. Then I'll give them different investigations or threat hunting scenarios to actually go through. For threat hunting, it's always throws people off because there isn't always a very well-defined target, right? Your job is to proactively look for a threat, right? So you'll create kind of like a client or kind of like an avatar, basically, of like what you want to find. And then as you go on your threat hunt, right? If you find other things, right, that could be malicious, your job is just to document them and then hand them off for the future, right? Because your goal is to look for the specific threat and see what you can actually find. Because if you don't do that, you'll just keep looking through the stack of hay forever, and you'll never get anything done.
Yeah, I call it chasing bunnies, right? Just you're chasing rabbits around and stuff like that. It's like, in enterprise environments, everything looks weird. Then you start getting into something, you're like, oh, that this application just works this way. Especially in like big financial companies. So how do you balance being a practitioner and being an educator? It sounds like you're doing some active work in clients, but then also spending time teaching. How do you balance that?
I don't know, honestly. I've just done it for the past Oh no, 4 years technically. So a lot of it goes hand in hand. As I
Mm-hmm.
get to like a lot of the cool stuff I get to do with my clients, right? I get to kind of give the teaching towards them, right? Nothing like confidential, but just like the overall view of like some of the cool things I do, so they get to understand like, hey, these are some of the things that employers are looking for, so you guys should probably get to focus on them. Also, being able to actually break complex topics down for other people helps me be a better practitioner for whatever type of job role that I have. 'Cause a lot of times I have to explain like what I'm doing towards my clients, and they're always very technical. So I had to learn how to actually break complex topics down. Especially for my students, I tell them like if you want to get from like a senior towards a lead or lead to a principal or a manager, you have to be able to do that. That's the biggest skill they're looking for. Because there'll be like a baseline technical competency they'll expect, but if you can't explain what you're doing, then you won't get that job.
Right. Now, just make a simple drawing about what's going on. I
Yeah.
think that's a really hard thing for junior analysts to do is to,
Like conceptualize what they're actually doing.
conceptualize what they're actually seeing, right? And what they're experiencing and why it's a threat or why they believe it's a threat. Is it worthwhile getting into cybersecurity in 2025?
I would say as understand which again go back understand what your why actually is to this, right? It is harder than it was 3 or 4 years ago, right? Because of unique circumstances, right? In my opinion, it is still worth it, right? Any goal is worth it if you define it. It has a value that you want to try to achieve, right? That's how I view everything in life, right? I get everything worthwhile in life. You're a little bit older than I am, John. So you understand that everything that's worth value in life is going to be hard, right? Getting married, having kids, starting a family, taking care of yourself, those all require sacrifices. So it's just up to you to determine is the sacrifice worth for what I actually want to get at the end, right? If it's not, then maybe do something else. But if it is, then go for it, right? And then just understand how the perspective of this may take longer than you expect, right? And that is okay. My thing of it is if we're comparing this towards like being a doctor, being a lawyer, they spend sometimes 10 years of their life to do one thing, like 10% of your entire lifetime on this planet. Like the God bless you with, they're gonna have to do one single thing. And so if you're trying to get within cybersecurity for 6 months and then it doesn't happen, it's not that bad. All right. Just have that type of perspective. That's what I'll tell people.
Yeah, definitely. I think cybersecurity and because it's based on IT and there's so many different ways that people are deploying technology into companies and how they're using it and the customizations that happen. I often feel like cybersecurity is maybe one of the most complicated disciplines to get into because you have to learn a lot about a lot of different systems and kind of hook them up in your brain so that you can kind of extract the information that you need, whether it's a protection mechanism or detection capability or how you're going to respond to events and understanding the business. I think it's a very complicated field. So I do really appreciate you spending the time, teaching people a lot about it, and then especially that you're applying it to like what's actually an industry versus just concepts. The other question I have for you, finally, is you've helped students increase their salaries by $40,000 or more. What advice would you give to someone who feels stuck in their current cybersecurity role?
I would go back towards overall topics, right? I would ask you, why do you feel stuck? All right, like what exactly are you doing? Be very, very honest with yourself. Are you putting in necessary work and effort to try to get leveled up, right? Again, be very, very honest with yourself. A lot of times it's no, right? If I went on your phone, how much social media time would I see? How much time are you on TikTok, on Facebook, on Instagram, right? For a lot of us, it's like 4 to 5 hours a day. People don't realize that, right? So people tell me I can't have no time. Like there definitely is time, right? If I go on your phone, I could probably shave up 2 hours of time from that, and you could devote that towards actually learning or improving yourself, right? I'd also ask, are you willing to get outside your comfort zone, right? Which means meeting people, going coming to podcasts like this, talking towards different professionals, right? Because again, as you probably know, John, it's not even what you know or who you know, it's who knows you, right? For example, we both know who LeBron James is, but you have no idea like who the hell we are, right? So having people actually know what the value you can bring towards them, right, goes a long, long way towards being successful inside the space. So go ahead, John.
No, I like your advice. I mean, I think that a lot of times people get stuck because they're comfortable, right? they get comfortable in whatever it is that they're doing, and then they're not getting promoted, and this isn't happening, and that's not happening. And many times, I've had analysts come to me and say, "Hey, I'm ready to be promoted," and it's like, "Okay, are you ready to be promoted?" It's like, what do you think are, other than time and seat, right? That you've been in this role for a long time. That doesn't mean that you can go from a tier 2 analyst and position to a tier 3 analyst position, or go from an analyst position to a threat hunter or a threat intelligence analyst or some other role that you would think might be a path forward, because the skills that you have, or it may not even be technical skills, like you were saying, it might be just communication skills. It may be, when you go up in roles, you typically have to mentor more or bring other people up with you. And if you don't like to talk to people and you don't like to communicate, it's really hard for you to go up in that role. And it's true for like CISOs as well, right? It's meaning that, I think that honestly, my natural state is introvert. My natural state is to get in on the keyboard and type and do stuff and write emails and just keep closed. But as a CISO, that my job requires me to communicate. It requires me to think strategically, and not just think strategically, but put a strategy in place and then communicate the strategy so that everyone knows. And that is much more extrovert kind of skills. But to do that role, I had to do something else. And like you said, if you're not continuously learning about your craft, and you don't, you're spending time on TikTok instead of, watching Ellington Training Academy videos, if that's what you're doing, then you're probably stuck just because you're comfortable. That next role is uncomfortable. Maybe you don't know what your path is to learn. But again, it's, talk to people and find out how they got to that next role, and spend time learning about what it is, and practice and meet more people and those kinds of things. I think your advice is great.
Yeah, I'll often find that they'll talk to different people, and people will tell them like the amount of work it takes. And like, you know what? Like, nah, like there might be an easier way, and they'll keep asking 20 different people, and they get the same answer. I'm like, it's going to be all hard work, right? The way in which the work is hard may be different, but the principle of doing the hard work is going to be exactly the same, right?
Agreed.
People always ask me like, Ken, like, what's the secret sauce? I'm like, well, I can make it more efficient, but it's still going to be hard, right? You still push up a boulder up a mountain, right? I can give you better tools and different mindset, but the work still has to be done, right?
Absolutely. Hey, Kenneth, it's been great to meet you. Thank you for being on the Be Fearless podcast.
Well, thank you, John. Appreciate it.